What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Existential Stoic podcast, episode 27, with me, Randy, and my buddy Danny. And
Hey, man.
this is the first time we are doing it on Zoom, and we're going to post it on YouTube. So today's episode, we're doing an episode on adjusting to change.
Lots of changes recently.
Ton of changes. I got to say, a whole lot has changed. But, they say the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, that is true, because isn't change the only constant in life?
Exactly. So learning to adjust to change and become comfortable with it. It's like this whole philosophy I heard of becoming comfortable with discomfort.
Yeah, it's I think that's part of it, right? It's because there's always some sort of level of, there's always discomfort in change. There's always that level of, like uncertainty or dealing with the new. That's always difficult, I think, for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So today we'll go over, why there's change in life, some strategies for dealing with change. And then, if you're going through change and having some difficulty, we'll cover some of that stuff too. So I guess this is somewhat salient because I just had some big changes in my life. I changed professions. I changed locations. I changed, those would be the big ones. Yeah. You have any changes going on in your life recently, Danny?
Some changes to some of my workload and stuff, because I added on some things that I'm doing. So now I have more to do, which is different. Yeah. And also, I guess you could argue I got the puppy, which is a change too. So yeah, some changes.
Yeah, right. It seems like it seems like there's always changes, because it's like, on one hand, we like things to be the same, but on the other hand, we like them to be new and different. So like, and it seems like it always gets to that point where you're doing the same thing, it seems to get boring. And then you want changes, and then it's like, oh, everything's new. Oh my gosh. Blah.
Yeah, that's what happens. Well, it's just like we talk, it's funny. It's almost like with we look for problems. We also look for changes, right? We look for things to be different. We want them to be the same, but we also want new things, and we want other things, right? And that requires change. So you can't get around it. It's like, no matter what, if it stayed the same, we would get bored. I think it would be tedious after a while.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how people deal with it that don't change anything.
Yeah. So it's kind of a necessary part of life. I mean, life in itself is somewhat changed. We have birth, and then growing and growing and growing, and then dying.
Yeah, there was this wise pre-Socratic philosopher who said that you cannot step in the same river twice.
Ooh, I've heard that one. That's a good one.
I like that one.
Yeah. And they say if you stop growing, you start dying, you start getting worse, something like that. So, in terms of dealing with change, let's talk about some strategies for dealing with change. One of my ones that, okay, I have a few strategies for dealing with change.
Obviously.
So, well, you need them because, for a long time in my life, I didn't have strategies for dealing with change. And then when it would come up, it would like knock me off my feet.
Yeah.
And so then, you get older, you do it enough times, and all of a sudden you have like, oh, okay, now I can kind of understand some things about change. So my first thing is to expect change. Expect that there will be some difficulty, expect that it'll take some time to get used to. Like now, anytime I have a significant change in my life, I just give myself 3 months. I know it's going to take me 3 months to really like get into it. So I just say, hey, just be gentle with yourself and just be patient.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I think the expectation's good too, because it's like when we don't expect it, it does. It just comes out of nowhere. And then you're not prepared for it, or you're not prepared for the, the emotions, or the feelings are going to arise anyway. You might as well just get ready for it and expect it, rather than, trying to fight it or be broadsided by it all of a sudden when you realize that, oh shit, things are changing and I got to deal with this now.
Mm-hmm.
I like that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Expecting it's good.
Yeah. So that's one thing that I do. And then the other thing that I try and do is to bring routine to my change. So like right now I have some big changes going on, but I've brought routine to it. So it seems somewhat normal. It seems like, waking up, having coffee, exercising, journaling, uh, doing the things like having somewhat of a routine, both the beginning and the end of the day, help me really deal with change in a much more productive manner.
Yeah, it's funny. That's always really helpful, especially having because we no matter what changes occur, right? We're always there. So you can bring your habits with you. You can bring your routines with you. It does make it a lot easier. I noticed that it's funny, with the one thing I had to do with the puppy was because he gets up, obviously, and needs to go out like first thing. So I had to swap like I used to wake up, I'd make coffee, have a cigarette, and then I'd go and journal right away. And that would be like my sort of process in the morning. But with him, I have to kind of flip it because, he doesn't want to wait and I don't want to make him wait. That seems rude since he can't get out the door on his own. So I had to change it around, but it's like, I still kept my same routine is still intact. It's just done a little differently. I just get up first and deal with him and then we're good. And it's fun. It works out. And I think that's true. You can keep the same you can keep the things that matter to you, right, in practice, and it helps you adjust to all of that and makes it easier, makes it
Yeah,
your own.
that's a good point in dealing with change because some you have to really take control of the things that are within your control. It's like that serenity prayer, like grant me the I don't know, serenity and wisdom and
It's
but it's
too
like,
early, Adam.
yeah, it's like let me change the things I can, accept the things I can't, and be able to know the difference, basically.
Yeah.
Because like, yeah, I mean, like you with that example, he has to get out in the morning. You can't really change that. And so but being able to move around that.
Well, I think that's a big part of change, right? It's also like recognizing, it's like the Stoics said, right? Realizing what's out of our control and what's in our control. And kind of like, certain things that are out of our control, you have to also look at them too and think like, well, if it's part of something that you wanted, a change that you actually want in your life, well, then you have to sort of make it fit your routine, right? You have to make it fit your life and, figure out a way to work with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So um what about when change is uncomfortable? Because there have been so many times in my life where change has just been like uncomfortable, where like something changed and I'm like, I don't want to be here. And then and I can like look back to those times in my life. And I think just for me, just like enduring through them. But what are your thoughts?
I mean, yeah, that's the tough part, right? Because sometimes I think the only thing we can do is endure through. There's not, it depends on the situation, I guess, right? If it's certain kinds of discomfort you have to endure, you can't get around them otherwise. Then I think it's also, in those situations too, I think though it's also making it as much as we can, still making it our own or making it bearable in ways, finding ways to make it comfortable, find time for yourself. It depends on the type of situation we're talking about. I can think back to like to college, like living situations that I didn't necessarily want to be in, right? Those are always tough, roommate situations, things like that, where you don't necessarily have like control over who you're living with or something. And in those situations, I think, like finding that space for yourself, having some boundaries, and that can make it a lot easier, but also being, more patient with people or being more patient with circumstances. Sort of like, I mean, basically enduring, right? Because patience is endurance. So learning to just kind of put up with certain things that might be not necessarily what you want, but they're also just part of the way the world is right now for you.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I always try and remember in those really difficult times is just one day at a time. Like
Yeah.
that mentality really helps me get through it because I'm just like, I know that like I know I'm in some difficult situations. I know this change may not be what I want, but I'm just going to focus on today. let's do the best I can today, and then tomorrow will take care of itself, you know?
Yeah, I like that mentality. It's funny too, because you have, I think, a lot of changes too, I think, are changes that we want, but they come with a lot of either, either discomfort or extra work or, difficulty in other ways, challenges. And I think, like for instance, one of the things that I took on a new job that I'm excited about, but it's going to be a ton of work for about it's short term. So for about a month and a half up front, it'll be a lot of work. And it's like, so I know I need to fit that into my schedule. I know I need to make that happen. So I'm going to have to, I'll probably have to let some things that I want to do wait for a while that I wanted to do now. But it's a good opportunity, so it makes sense to do it, right? And I think that's the other side of it too, is a lot of these changes are things we probably want to happen. So how do we then incorporate into our life, and what do we decide to sort of let go of or to, push forward on?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So how do you decide?
Yeah, it's a tough one, huh?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think in
like,
my case, oh,
uh,
go ahead.
okay, so like I was gonna say, it's like crazy how things can change, because like sometimes you work really hard to get to some place, and then you get there, and all of a sudden your perspective changes, and
Yeah.
you kind of just have to, like, for me, you just have to sit down and just think about it and journal and really like visualize it and imagine what it's going to be like.
Yeah, journaling is probably like the most helpful thing you can do, I think, for I mean, I don't know. I find it helpful for like every problem that exists because I do it all the time. It's like one of the best ways to work through, any issue you're dealing with, to work through problems and to just figure things out. Because if you're dealing with change, like even if a situation like where you need to make decisions about what to sort of put on hold or something, journaling, I think, is the best way to sort of figure out what's your priorities and what matters most to you now moving forward so that you can make those decisions correctly.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm so surprised more people don't do it.
Why do you think that is? Because it's like,
I
because it's time consuming. It's not easy. You can't just like press the button, turn on the TV, and
maybe it's active. It requires you to like it requires reflection, right? I mean, it's funny because I never really it's one of those things I never really think about because I think I've always done it. Even when I was little, I used to do it all the time. I love writing. So it was like for me, it was just a part of my day. It always was. So I never really thought about, if it hadn't been part of my day, how would I have sort of incorporated it? And so like incorporating new journaling practices is not really hard because I already, when you already do something, trying a new practice is pretty easy usually, right? You already have that routine down and stuff. But yeah, I don't know, maybe because it is active, it's reflective, it
yeah.
requires thought.
When I was younger, I always thought it was girly, like keeping a diary.
Yeah, I mean a lot of people did, right?
But dude, I actually, uh, right before I was moving, I was looking through some boxes, and I actually saw a journal from when I was a kid. Like I had this one journal, it had dolphins on the cover of it. It had a little dolphin bookmark, and like I was reading one of the entries there, and it was like a really thorough entry about like the first dog that I had and how we picked it out. And then like a day before his first birthday, we took it to the vet and it had to get euthanized. And I was like, geez, that's
Oh
really
man, that's
great.
heavy.
I know. I was like devastated as a kid. Oh,
They're the best too. When you find old ones, I don't know, they're funny as hell sometimes because it's like you never know. Like it's funny because like if you write for a while in journals, it's like you forget what's in there. You really do, especially if they're old. I mean, if you go back to some of the old ones, man, like I think I still have mine somewhere. I know I do some of them, and like oh god, I don't even know what the hell's in there. And it's probably funny as hell because sometimes it's like these you can get these really deep reflective pieces from like a child's perspective on something that are really interesting. Yeah. Something like that though is I mean, that makes sense that you wrote it down, right? That's something natural, I think, to work through.
yeah. So while you were mentioning that, something came across my mind, how like something to help deal with changes. because like oftentimes in the moment change is really difficult and painful and unwanted. Not all, I mean, not always, but it can be. However, when you look back on it, like you look in the rearview mirror, change oftentimes will be somewhat beneficial for your growth. So like all of these changes that have been really difficult, you can kind of connect the dots looking backwards and be like, hey, this is really good for my growth. I'm, I'm this type of person because of that thing. I'm so much stronger or better or whatever it is. So that can actually be a perspective to look at current changes and difficulties with, that it's like this is kind of the catalyst for my growth.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. It's also, I mean that's also why journaling is useful, right? Because you can do that kind of practice of looking back, reflecting, thinking about it. And it is funny, isn't it? How like I always think it's funny how the times that seem the hardest now, you know, if you really think about it, in like a year or 5 years, you'll look back at it as a point that was crucial for who you are. And that's like always the case. We almost, I think most people, I will say most of the time, not all the time, because I'm sure there's cases where the right change doesn't occur. But, going through tough situations, I think most people, when they get through it, they're stronger for it, right? They've developed new skills, they've developed character. And I think that's, that whole saying of, like people used to say it all the time. They don't seem to say it as much anymore, but like, oh, that builds character, or, it's a character building thing. I think that's the whole point of that, is that, well, like you'll look back on this as something beneficial, as something that sort of was, you know, really important for who you are now. And so it won't be interpreted the same way later on. Like it might feel difficult now, it might be hard now, but later on you will see this in a new light. And I think that's the important thing about change too, is that we change. So even though the change might seem hard now, later it might not seem like a big deal, or it might have seemed so important that you could never imagine not, that not in your life, right?
Yeah, I like what you said there with perspective, because like so many times when you're going through change, it feels like time is a standstill. Like each moment
Yeah.
can last forever. And then or sometimes like things can change just in a moment. But a lot of times when they do change and you don't want them, it feels like time is standing still. And you forget that there's going to be a year later and 2 years later and 5 years later and 10 years later and like all this stuff. And then it's crazy kind of how time can move both like really fast and really slow.
Oh, time's insane. Our perception of it makes, I mean, I've always thought about that, like how it's not, we measure time, but it's not like, it's not fixed in our perception at all. It moves so quick sometimes and so slow at times. And it's really a strange phenomenon. But yeah, it's interesting. I think, I always tell myself that, and I could probably find parts in my journals where I reflected on exactly this point. But a lot of times when I'm dealing with something difficult, I always tell myself, well, look, in 5 years, you'll look back on this and it will be totally different. You'll probably like laugh at it if it was, or you'll think it was important. You couldn't imagine it otherwise. Like, so I think that perspective too is helpful, because it's like, it's similar to the perspective we talked about before, I forget who said it, where you said, you mentioned it all the time, where we underestimate what we can do in a day, or overestimate what we can do in a day and underestimate what we can do in 10 years or whatever, a year.
Mhm.
And I think it's that kind of idea that, if we change our perspective to down the road, that change will seem very different. And often it's not as difficult as it actually seems in the moment.
Yeah, like I read a lot of books on finance, and a lot of the wealthiest guys, they just keep on saying that like it's a game of time. You just need to don't lose, and like don't lose your money, and then just give it time, and that's basically it.
Those are
Yeah,
both good. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Don't lose it. Hang on to it. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's that impatience, right? I mean, I think it's funny, but I think it's one of the biggest things that we all struggle with, you know, um, because our expectations, and we're so trained for the immediate now, everything has to be right now. We get so frustrated if things don't work immediately, that I think that really it influences like literally everything else and how we interpret it. And it does really mess us up. I mean, I think, I don't know. I don't know this for sure, but I have to imagine back, before the internet, before TV, before planes, before cars, people probably had a much different idea of change and time because things just took longer to do, like they did.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
couldn't
mean,
imagine. Yeah, anyway.
yeah, if you wanted to go across like from America to Europe, it would take 3 weeks at sea or something like that.
Yeah, I think even longer it might have taken. Yeah, it was insane. It was a long trip. Now
Yeah.
you can do it in what, like 4 or 5 hours?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
I think
forget
that's,
that.
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say we forget that stuff.
We do, yeah. And I think that's part of it, right? Because we've sped things up so fast with all of our modern advances. They've all really been to give us more time, right? So we've cut the amount of time we spend sort of on the intermediary getting from point A to point B, which gives us more time there. But then we also have that expectation with everything else. And it's like when it comes to personal development and growth, things sometimes just take time. It's not going to happen immediately. Like,
Hmm.
it's funny, like I think about that a lot, like, when you're like trying to change your character, we people talk about like habit formation and how important it is, right? And you want to develop these habits. And like there's always this thought in the back, I swear to God, in the back of my mind, like, oh, just do it today and then it's good. You got that, you're good, right? And it's like you haven't developed anything at that point. Like you need at least like, probably a solid week to get introduced to it, and then probably really a few months before you actually start to make it part of your routine. But we all think, right? We did it one day, so now I'm good. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
part of my routine. It's
yeah, yeah. Like change is something that happens so slowly that it's pretty much imperceptible. Like
yeah.
you go to the gym every day and you don't actually see yourself getting in better shape, but you do. But it's just because you see yourself every day and you're just getting like incrementally better. Or hmm,
Well, exercising is such a good it's such a good example because it is one of those things where it is like you can't, you know, you really can't speed it up too much. I mean, there's only so much you can do. Your body will get worn out after a certain point, right? So it does. It just takes a long time. And you're right. The changes are so incremental. You hardly notice it until like, all of a sudden you realize you're in better shape one day. And it's like, it's great. But yeah, I think it's a good way to look at it because it's definitely a lot of work. It's hard. It's not easy. And, I think if we took that mentality to everything else in life, our changes would probably be a lot easier to deal with because we'd be prepared for, the commitment and the time required and sort of really just the like the perseverance and the attitude, to keep going and keep at it because we know that there'll be a good thing at the outcome at the end. We just have to keep working on it.
yeah. Uh, what you were saying there with like giving ourselves the time and just being able to stick with it. Like I noticed recently for anything that I actually want to accomplish, I I plan for a lot more time. Like it used to be where I want to do something and I'd have like a few week to a few month perspective on it, thinking like I'm going to do it by then and then whatever. Now I don't even think it like anything that's going to take me less than years. I don't even think about that because it's unrealistic. Like in order to really get good at something, in order to be able to contribute in a meaningful way, it's just something where it's going to take time.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because it's like, yeah, like a project, something that you already do, you're already skilled at. You can give yourself a set amount of time because you should know how long it takes, right? I mean, hopefully you do or have a good sense of it. But yeah, like anything else, like where you're developing a skill or you're trying to do something, you can't look. I think that's a great point, right? You can't really look weeks down the road because it's just not going to happen. And it's just also it'll if it's frustrating as hell, when you're expecting a change to happen way sooner than it's going to happen, and you just get frustrated, and you end up abandoning it. I think that's what happens to a lot of people.
Hmm. Yeah, like you end up beating yourself up. Like I noticed with my changes recently how um I just had to be like even more patient and more gentle with myself because there was all this stuff changing and I still wanted to be able to like, you know, spend all this time learning programming and do all this other stuff. And I was just like, hey, just take your time. It'll happen when it happens and just keep at it every day and you'll get there, you know?
I like that you mentioned that too, like being being more gentle with yourself is really a good point. Because, I notice that all the time too, though. You have all these things you want to do. You have all these new things you want to incorporate into your life, new projects, or, you change your circumstances like you did dramatically, where you have to like adjust and stuff. And it's like, I do it myself too. I see myself at like, I'll be at midday or the end of the day, and I'm getting frustrated because I can't do all the things that I want to do that day. And it's like, well, just chill out. It's a day. It's one day. Who cares? You have plenty of time to do this stuff. You're still going, you're still doing it, you're still making progress. So that's good. Right. I think people forget too a lot that, even making one step forward during the day is good. It's beneficial. As long as you're doing something towards your goals, it's always better than doing nothing.
Mhm.
And we get caught in this mindset that it has to be now, or we have to do all this stuff, because I think part of it too is though this whole idea of people like you need to work 70 hours a week and have 4 side hustles and do this and that. And it's like, it's insane. And it's like you're jamming so much into your day that it's like you either are gonna not do things well, not learn things appropriately, or they're just not gonna last because you're just gonna burn yourself out so fast.
Yeah, there definitely is this like overwork type of thing that seems to be very popular nowadays.
I think part of it is I honestly think part of it is too because you know the connections are having the cell phone, having the internet is awesome and it's very helpful. But I think with a lot of people with work, they don't have boundaries. And they're effectively on call or, available all the time. And it's like, you need boundaries between, I think, what your work is and your life and other stuff, because you just get, you can't do anything. It's insane.
Hmm.
I mean, I know so many people who work it's like they get texts and calls and shit at fucking like 9 and 10 at night. It's for work. It's like, why are
Yeah,
you responding to that?
I know,
You
right?
know,
Yeah.
like what the fuck are your hours? Like,
Yep.
uh,
Yeah. So let's see. Adjusting to change,
all right,
dealing
that's
with
what
change. Right? Welcome to the off topic podcast. Yeah,
I know.
yeah, dealing with change. It can be, and sometimes you just have to be uncomfortable in it.
You
Like,
do, and you know what? Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I'll let you finish.
yeah, just like sometimes you just have to be uncomfortable, like there it's like I think a military slogan or something like that where they talk about becoming comfortable with discomfort. And it's such a skill because like I notice all these times when I'm uncomfortable and I'm just like, well, what can I do to make myself as comfortable as possible sitting in this? Because it's just going to be here. I just got to sit in it. And because oftentimes change can show up like that. Like it can be, I mean, any type of growth is all uncomfortable. And so we really have to learn how to thrive in that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure the military, that sounds like something they would say, right? But it is interesting because it's like I think knowing too that it'll be uncomfortable in the process, but it will stop being uncomfortable at a point and will be good. And keeping that in mind is very helpful sometimes. That there's a light at the end of the tunnel if you stick with it and keep at it. But you're right. I mean, sometimes you just have to sit with it. There's no way around it. I think and when you keep I think the perspective is important. When you keep your perspective more long term, or keep reminding yourself of that, at least it makes it more bearable because you stop expecting such an immediate adjustment. Because we don't. I mean, we're very quick. I mean, we're interesting in that we can adapt to a lot of things very, very effectively, but not always very quickly. And like if we give ourselves time, we will adjust to it, we will adapt to it, we'll find a way to make it work for us to where it becomes comfortable, it becomes normal. But it's also interesting too, because we always talk about comfort and discomfort. And it's like a lot of times what we consider comfortable isn't even what we want. It's not even like pleasant, or we're not happy, or we're, whatever. And it's like, so it's like this weird sort of comfort of what we know, and, really just like a discomfort with the uncertainty or the unknown and the time in between to where we get good at it and it becomes part of who we are.
Hmm. Yeah, it seems like nowadays the comfort culture is just like, I just want to wear sweatpants, have a comfortable couch, watch Netflix, eat my favorite food. I just want, like the comfort culture is the way to go. And then there are like a few people on the other end of that, like the ultra marathoners and the all
Very
that
few.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, dude, it's so funny. I noticed that because, like, I mean, it makes sense. Everybody's been home on lockdown, but it's like, it is funny when you go out, you see everybody's in like sweatpants now
Yeah.
all the time. It's like, it's like, what the hell is the point of, getting dressed? I'm just going to the store. Who cares? It's like the only time people see me is my upper portion of my body. They don't
Yeah.
ever see, it's like, it's great. It
Yeah,
is
I
funny.
noticed the same thing last week or a couple weeks ago. Just like a bunch of people hanging out in sweatpants.
Yeah, it's very comfortable. It's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
They're comfortable with each other. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's funny. I don't know. Changes, dealing with changes is always interesting though, too, because it's like everything's always in a constant state of change. I mean, even we are, our society is, and it's like there's always so much resistance to that change. It's funny if you look at like, if you look at it from like a social level, you always see anytime some change occurs in society, you always see like conflicting groups, and people who want to keep it the same and don't want it to change, and they're afraid of the change coming and it'll change things, and they'll lose out or they'll miss out or something like that. And it's interesting, like there's this like part of us, I guess, that maybe we want we want to know what's going on. We want to be able to expect things to be a certain way. So we have like this almost like internal mechanism to like resist change also. But we also know that change is necessary. And the reality is like, without change, there's nothing else is going to be better, right? You can't improve, you can't progress. Everything we talk about as being good usually involves some level of change, right? It's progress, it's development, it's improvement, right? All of those things, meeting goals. I mean, it's all changes.
Mhm. Yeah, so we gotta learn to embrace it and actually kind of seek it out.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of it, right? Is embracing those changes and just embracing the fact that life is changing. If you want, if you want a good life, or if you want to, realize your goals, realize your capabilities, you need change then, right? You need to be able to change,
Yeah.
and you need to be
Like,
able to be responsive to it. Yeah.
yeah, I heard that really early on that like your life is the way it is because of who you are. And if you want your life to be different, you're gonna have to change. And so, and so like, I heard that early on and it kind of stuck with me. And so really, I think that was around the point where I started modeling who I considered successful people, like people who had what I wanted and who were in life where I wanted to be, just kind of copying what they did. And I know personally from change that like this is just something that I found um, from trying a whole bunch of things is that like I always go in full throttle. Like I'm very good in the beginning and then it kind of like wanes off. And so like knowing that I actually when I start new stuff, I have to throttle myself in the beginning because otherwise I'll like burn myself out and then I'll become disinterested. So like I have to throttle myself in the beginning to actually limit myself in the beginning so that I want more of it and kind of incorporate that into a habit to build up the change.
Huh. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. That's a good one though, because I think a lot of people do that, right? You're excited about something, right? You want to make it happen. You go all in, and it's like when you do that, that's the same method, right? You burn yourself out or you get disinterested because you way overdo it, and you're probably not seeing, because when we go all in like that too, you might see a lot of progress up front, but you hit like plateaus really quickly, I think, because you're not giving yourself time to process. And I think that's also part of it too, right? Is if we take our time with change, we also process it and, kind of develop what we need better, I think, more effectively over time, rather than trying to do it all at once. That's a really good one though, is like kind of trying to like really kind of manage yourself more in these changes so that ultimately it works out, right? And you can get through it and get what you want out of it.
Mm, yeah,
You know, I
cool.
think even that is a lot of times I think important with change too, is just like, you know, and journaling is really effective here too, is understanding what you want out of it. Knowing actually what your expectations are or what your, you know, like people talk about like a metric, right? Having an idea of how to evaluate your success or your progress is really important because, you know, if you don't have that, I think it's very hard to do any sort of personal development because you have no clue of how to measure your success. And so if you're looking at people that are people that you already consider there for whatever you're trying to develop, right? It's going to be very hard to measure yourself against that. You know, so you need to have your own sort of standard, I think, and that helps in terms of like, you know, understanding, you know, how much you need to put in, like sort of throttling yourself, keeping yourself motivated, but also knowing, you know, that this is what progress looks like each day, you know, whether it's just like I did something or whether it's like, you know, meeting a specific goal or whatever.
That's a really good point that that you just made there, where it doesn't depend on the situation. It really depends on what you want, because how you respond to that situation is going to help you get what you want, as long as you know what it is. If you have no direction and you don't realize your agency in the situation, then yeah, the situation is going to have its impact on you. But whatever the situation is, if you know your target, you'll be able to adjust and respond to it to get to that target. That was a really good
Yeah,
point you
right.
made there.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, it's funny, man. I don't know. It's like, well, I'll say like this project I just took on is like it's a writing project, but it's a lot. It's a I mean, it's not like it's a fairly lengthy thing. So it's like I guess it'll probably be like say 50 pages, give or take, you know, of pretty dense stuff. But like I know too, like it's funny because like, you know, going into this, I know what I can do in that area. So I also know like I know that if I do so much a day, you know, it's really not hard to do. And I think we often forget about that too with change, you know, it's like because change is difficult, I think, because oftentimes it's unknowns. There's a lot of unknowns or uncertainty in it and trying to figure out, you know, like how do I best get to the end goal of this change really? How do I get on the other side either a better person or, you know, having developed these skills? A lot of it is just knowing too, like, okay, what's the incremental steps I need to make, right, to get there? And how do I get there? And I think, you know, a lot of it is hard because, you know, a lot of us don't know ourselves very well all the time, or we don't you know, we lie to ourselves about who we are, and then it makes it a lot harder to deal with those changes too.
Yeah, definitely. So if you had to give somebody, like, let's say you had a couple minutes to download everything, all of your recommendations about change. Like, let's say somebody's going to have some massive life changes, and you were given 2 minutes where you could kind of help them out, or prepare them for it. What
Hmm.
would you say?
Massive life changes. I guess I would say, you know, first of all, I would definitely journal and try and get a sense of like, why are you going through this change? What do you hope to get out of this change? Or what is really, you know, is it something that you just need to deal with, or is it something that's for you? You know, how does that sort of factor in? Try and get a sense of, you know, what you can do, where your agency lies. So what's within your power and what's going to be outside of your power. So what is circumstantial or what's situational that you have no control over that you need to then work within? Because it's almost like, you know, a lot of times it's like, um, you can't always, I forget what the saying is like, right? You can't change like the system or whatever, but you can play the game. You have to play within the rules, right? Or whatever. So if you understand the rules, or if you understand the situation, you know, how can you then exercise your agency to get through it and get what you want? And I think, you know, the other side of that too is also be patient with yourself. You know, don't be too hard on yourself and try your best to keep your expectations at a level that makes sense for you, relative to your skill and your ability. I think that's probably my sort of best, I don't know, 4 or 5 things, however many I said. I don't know. I wasn't counting.
Yeah. Those are good recommendations.
What would
Definitely.
you add to
I
that?
would add, this is so counterintuitive. Uh, and it's something that I'm really just coming to grips with recently, but I would say slow down. Like every time I'm trying to change or I'm in some situation that changed, I always am trying so desperately to get out of it, you know? And so like actually learning to slow down and just like be there because it's going to last however long it lasts. But like kind of slowing down gets rid of some of the struggle and then it doesn't necessarily seem as terrible. And then I like a lot of the stuff that you said. Uh,
I really like slowing down, actually. It's a really good one too. Is like, it's a great reminder too in general, I think, for a lot of things we do is just to kind of, we're always in a rush. And it's even like, it's funny. It's like, I know we mention it every goddamn episode, but it's even like the delights, the small delights thing, right? Is like getting yourself to be more aware of that you're living life and the things around you rather than rushing through everything. And it's
dude,
funny,
Mhm.
I was gonna say we miss so much every day because we're just flying past things and not even like it doesn't even register because our brains are really good at they're very good at getting rid of all the crap that doesn't matter in that moment, right? And so I think it's interesting because we can miss so much that we're just not aware of or we just don't not consciously aware of, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I actually wanted to tell you because there were a few days where I forgot to do it. And like I woke up feeling kind of like blah. And then last night I made sure I did it before I went to sleep and I woke up feeling great. And I was like, man, that's like proof that it worked.
I mean, it works anyway. I know it does because it's, dude, it's so much. I don't know. It's like I notice so much more now. Just like I'm more conscious in the moment of these good moments now. It's interesting. Like, and I know I wasn't before because I know I missed them all before. So it definitely works. It's amazing. It's like it also shows how I think our we forget to like just like our we can whether if we want to exercise, I'll use that example. Our physical bodies, right? We can adapt to stuff by just doing it over and over, right? You get stronger. You're able to get through the day. You're able to do those routines, whatever. And it's like our mind's pretty much the same. You can train your mind to focus on certain things or to filter out that stuff. And I think it's interesting because we can do little things that really do make a big impact or a big difference on how we think and how we look at the world.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And so let's see. Other than slowing down, I would for change, I would say yeah, know your destination. And if you don't know your destination, start thinking about it. Because this is the greatest point. For so long in my life, I was frustrated because other people knew where they wanted to be in life. They knew what they wanted to do, and I had no idea. And it really wasn't until I was like 35 where I actually kind of knew what I wanted to do in life. But it seemed like other people already knew their goals, like especially when they were young, when they were like 18, they knew exactly what they want to do. They were already doing it. They were phenomenal at it. I was like, this just isn't fair.
Yeah,
So,
screw those people, right?
yeah. Yeah. But like learning to just, if you don't know what it is you want, just start trying to figure it out. Like what could be what you want and just start going there and figuring that stuff out because like you said, the change is the situation. That's only part of it. The other part's how you respond to it. So that.
No, I like that. It's true. It's so funny. I remember that too, man. I hated, oh my God, I hated people like that in college and stuff. Who like, see, they just knew the day one what they were gonna do. They knew the job they wanted and stuff. But at the same time, it's like it's funny because like I had no idea. And I think it worked out really well for some of them. It didn't for others. I think that's part of it. Some of them were probably, it's really was the expectations of their parents and stuff. And like that's what they were doing. They didn't really have an idea of what they wanted. I think it's difficult. A lot of times we don't know what we want till much later in life, and that's fine. I think you're right. If we just try to figure it out, at least you're working towards something you want, right? It's like a life that you want, that you're carving out, rather than somebody else's, or rather than letting the world decide for you. Ultimately, what it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty good for our first,
Yeah.
over the internet episode.
Yeah, that was good. Everything.
Right?
Not
Episode
side by side.
27, the first, or is it 27? Something like that. The first over the internet episode.
It is episode 27.
Yeah, all right. Well, guys, if you did enjoy that, make sure to subscribe. No, make sure to subscribe, share with friends. Come join us midweek for a short little quick fix. And then also, if we're going to start posting these on YouTube as well. So come join us on YouTube, subscribe over there, like the videos,
Yeah.
all that fun stuff.
All right.
Good to see you, Danny.
Good to see you, Randy.
All right. Peace.